November 3rd, 1968, Frank Lucas was outnumbered 9-1. The Italian Mafia had sent their deadliest crew. Dominic the Butcher, Caetano, Salvatore Proface, Vincent the Iceman DeMarco, Anthony Russo, Carlo the Snake, and 4 more enforcers whose names even the FBI didn't know. They cornered Frank in the basement of Small's Paradise on 135th Street. No witnesses. No way out. Frank was 38 years old, still building his empire. The Genovese family was the most powerful crime organization in New York. Everyone expected the same ending. Frank Lucas dead in a basement. But what the mob didn't know was that Frank Lucas didn't play by anybody's rules. Only one of those 9 men walked out alive. And he delivered a message that made Carlo Gambino, the boss who had ordered over 300 hits, actually leave Harlem for good. This is the story of a night Frank Lucas became untouchable. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand Harlem in 1968. This wasn't Bumpy Johnson's Harlem anymore. The king had just died of a heart attack while eating fried chicken at Wells' restaurant. When Bumpy died, he left a vacuum. The Italian Mafia saw opportunity. They had always controlled the heroin coming into Harlem, the French Connection. Pure product from Marseilles, distributed by their people, taxed by their system. Every dealer in Harlem paid tribute. 10% off the top. You wanted to sell dope? You paid them, or you disappeared. That's how it had been for 20 years, but Frank Lucas had been watching, learning. He was Bumpy's driver for 5 years. He saw how the game worked. The mob charged $50,000 a kilo, cut it down to low purity, and by the time it hit the street, the product was garbage and the price was insane. Frank saw the math and had an idea. What if you bypass the mob entirely? What if you go straight to the source? Thailand, the Golden Triangle. The Vietnam War was raging. Soldiers were coming back addicted, and Frank knew someone, Leslie, Ike Atkinson, ex-army, married to Frank's cousin, running a bar in Bangkok where black soldiers went to forget. Frank flew to Bangkok alone. No protection, just a suitcase of cash and a plan. He told Ike what he wanted, 32 kilos of pure heroin, direct from the source. No lemon. Ike introduced him to the suppliers who controlled poppy fields deep in the jungle. Frank bought the entire shipment for $4,200 a kilo, the same product the mob paid $50,000 for. Frank called it Blue Magic, stamped with a blue mark so people knew it was his. Higher purity, same price, better product. Within weeks, Blue Magic flooded Harlem. The mob noticed. They sent word. Frank Lucas needed to come in, pay tribute, or pay with his life. Frank ignored it. A second message came, more direct. Come to Small's Paradise. Alone. Frank knew what that meant. They were going to kill him. Make an example. But Frank had learned something from Bumpy. Respect in Harlem wasn't given by the mob. It was earned from the streets. And the streets loved Blue Magic. Frank walked into Small's Paradise, bringing his brother and his cousin. The mob stopped him at the door. We said alone. Frank replied, business needs witnesses. They searched him. Found nothing. Let him downstairs. 9 men were waiting. Dominic Caetano sat at the head of the table. Vincent DeMarco blocked the door. Every man was armed. Dominic spoke first. You know why you're here? Frank looked around. Counted 9. Not really. You've been selling in our territory without permission. Your territory? Frank said. Last I checked, Harlem wasn't Little Italy. The smile disappeared. You've got 2 choices, Dominic said. Pay tribute or die. Frank stood calm. I got a third choice. The room laughed. You work for me. Vincent pulled his gun. Last chance. Frank didn't move. You're making a mistake. Then the lights went out. Gunfire erupted. Not from the mob, but from everywhere else. From behind crates. In minutes, it was over. 8 men were down. 1 man was left alive, Anthony Russo. Frank knelt in front of him. I'm not going to kill you. You're going to deliver a message. Tell Carlo Gambino that Harlem is closed. Tell him Frank Lucas owns the supply now. Frank handed him a small bag of Blue Magic. Give him this. Anthony ran. He found Gambino, bloodied and shaking, and delivered the message. Gambino tested the product and saw the truth. It was cleaner than anything he'd ever seen. Instead of ordering war, Gambino chose business. Because Frank had proven three things. He wasn't afraid to die. He was smarter, and his product was better. The mob never challenged him again. Frank Lucas became the richest man in Harlem. Untouchable. Years later, people argued whether it was all legend or truth. But one thing is certain. After that night, Harlem was never the same. The message spread fast across Harlem. Streets that night. Carlo Gambino listened very carefully then, made a decision. He would not start a war with Frank Lucas, not because he feared him directly, but because supply meant power always. And Frank Lucas controlled the source instead of violence. The Mafia changed strategy completely. They stopped pushing territory, stopped sending threats, and started watching Frank from distance. Harlem was no longer contested ground. It was Frank's kingdom now fully. Money began flowing faster than ever. Blue magic expanded beyond Harlem borders. Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, even parts of Jersey. Dealers switched sides overnight without hesitation because customers demanded only one thing, that blue stamp. Frank Lucas built an empire silently. Cash filled apartments, floors, walls, ceilings, millions stacked daily. No banks, no records, just discipline, loyalty, and control absolute. But success brings attention always eventually, and Frank made one fatal mistake. He believed power made him invisible. The police noticed the sudden purity, overdose numbers rising. Newspapers whispered rumors. A mysterious supplier. Untouchable, unseen, unknown. Then one man started watching closely. Detective Richie Roberts. Honest in a dirty system alone. He followed the money, not the bodies. While Frank ruled the streets confidently, law enforcement prepared something different quietly. Not bullets, not threats, but patience time, because empires don't fall overnight. They collapse slowly, quietly, from inside. And Frank Lucas was about to learn one brutal truth. The higher you rise, the harder the fall. The deal changed everything permanently, forever. Frank Lucas became more than street legend overnight, instantly. He became supply, not just dealer. The five families adjusted quietly, carefully. They stopped fighting Harlem directly anymore, because killing Frank meant losing access to the cleanest product on earth. Blue magic expanded. Nationwide fast, quietly. Detroit, Chicago, Philly, Washington, Atlanta, Miami. Routes opened overnight. Cash moved nonstop. Frank built systems, not chaos, disorder. Soldiers had rules. Violence controlled strictly. No addicts near his own people. Discipline above all. But power attracts enemies eventually, always. And not all wore suits, guns. Some wore badges. While Frank counted millions daily, nightly. Richie Roberts followed paper trails patiently. Corrupt cops began flipping slowly. One arrest led to another quietly. Wiretaps installed. Phones monitored constantly. The net tightened. Frank felt untouchable, unbeatable, unstoppable. He wore luxury, openly, publicly, proudly. Fur coats, diamonds, front row seats. And that visibility became his weakness. Because kings who show crowns too. The morning arrived. Quietly, unexpectedly early. Federal agents moved. Without sirens flashing. Warrants signed, sealed. Names already listed. Doors came down. Walls shook hard. Closets opened fast. Floors pulled up. Cash everywhere stacked. Hidden behind panels. Hundreds of thousands. Bundled tight, neatly. No banks involved. No records anywhere. Just raw proof. Frank stood still, watching, calmly silent. He didn't run. Didn't fight back. He understood instantly. This wasn't street business anymore now. This was law. And law plays a longer game. Richie Roberts watched from the doorway. Clean suit, calm. Eyes on Frank. No hatred present. You built something incredible, he said, but you trusted the wrong system. Frank smiled slowly, almost impressed slightly. Everybody does. He replied quietly. Courtrooms replaced Basements and alleys. Suits replaced. Guns and threats. Friends vanished fast. Phones went dead. Loyalty disappeared instantly. Faced with decades. Behind cold walls. Frank made choice. Survival over pride. He talked names. Route systems. Corrupt cops exposed. Entire networks fell. The streets felt. The shock waves. Supply lines broken. Prices climbed fast. And the legend of untouchable Frank finally cracked open. But even broken, his name remained, spoken with respect, and warning both. Because Harlem learned one final lesson. Power isn't forever. Control is illusion. And the game always collects payment. November 3rd, 1968, Frank Lucas was outnumbered 9-1. The Italian Mafia had sent their deadliest crew. Dominic the Butcher, Caetano, Salvatore Proface, Vincent the Iceman DeMarco, Anthony Russo, Carlo the Snake, and 4 more enforcers whose names even the FBI didn't know. They cornered Frank in the basement of Small's Paradise on 135th Street. No witnesses. No way out. Frank was 38 years old, still building his empire. The Genovese family was the most powerful crime organization in New York. Everyone expected the same ending. Frank Lucas dead in a basement. But what the mob didn't know was that Frank Lucas didn't play by anybody's rules. Only one of those 9 men walked out alive. And he delivered a message that made Carlo Gambino, the boss who had ordered over 300 hits, actually leave Harlem for good. This is the story of a night Frank Lucas became untouchable. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand Harlem in 1968. This wasn't Bumpy Johnson's Harlem anymore. The king had just died of a heart attack while eating fried chicken at Wells Restaurant. When Bumpy died, he left a vacuum. The Italian Mafia saw opportunity. They had always controlled the heroin coming into Harlem, the French Connection. Pure product from Marseilles, distributed by their people, taxed by their system. Every dealer in Harlem paid tribute. 10% off the top. You wanted to sell dope? You paid them, or you disappeared. That's how it had been for 20 years, but Frank Lucas had been watching, learning. He was Bumpy's driver for 5 years. He saw how the game worked. The mob charged $50,000 a kilo, cut it down to low purity, and by the time it hit the street, the product was garbage and the price was insane. Frank saw the math and had an idea. What if you bypass the mob entirely? What if you go straight to the source? Thailand, the Golden Triangle. The Vietnam War was raging. Soldiers were coming back addicted, and Frank knew someone. Leslie. Prison changed nothing. Inside Frank Lucas, the mind stayed sharp, the instincts alive. While time passed, behind gray walls, his story grew. On the streets, young hustlers spoke, his name quietly, as blueprint example, not because he fell, but how he rose. 5 years later, gates opened slowly. Frank stepped out, older, quieter, wiser. No empire waiting, no throne standing, just lessons earned. The world had moved. Drugs evolved markets. New players emerged. Frank watched carefully, never rushed again. He knew one truth. Better than most. The game doesn't end. It only changes. Those who survive learn when to stop. And Frank Lucas did something rare. He walked away alive. No bullet chasing. No detsampath. No revenge hunting. Just a name, carved into history. A warning and a legend both. Because in Harlem, they still remember. 9 men entered. 1 man left. And the rules changed. Forever after that, years rolled forward. Quietly without noise. Frank lived low, avoided attention completely. No flashy coats, no loud cars, no front rows. He understood survival better than anyone. The streets evolved fast. Younger players rose, louder, reckless, hungry. They chased fame, not structured discipline. Frank watched from a distance always, seeing mistakes repeat. He warned a few, most ignored advice. Because legends sound like stories until history repeats again. Meanwhile, law enforcement shifted focus elsewhere. New wars started, new targets named, but history lingers. In quiet corners, documentaries surfaced slowly. Books, interviews, rumors. Frank's name returned, not as threat, but as myth. A man who beat the Mafia once. A man who controlled supply, not streets. A man who knew when to fight and when to fold. Young dealers studied his methods carefully. Direct source control, disciplined organization, limited violence only. Time softened edges, but not memories. Frank carried lessons, like quiet scars. He woke early, lived simply quietly. No guards nearby, no entourage following. People passed him, unaware of history, walking beside legend. Sometimes young men recognized his face, asked careful questions. Frank answered calmly, never boasting, never warning. Because wisdom doesn't shout loudly anymore. The streets changed names. Corners renamed leaders. But greed stayed constant. Fear stayed familiar. Frank saw cycles repeat endlessly again. A kid rises fast. Money comes quick. Attention follows loudly. Then mistakes stack. Enemies multiply suddenly. And the fall comes faster than rise. Frank had lived every chapter already. He understood something few ever grasp. The real victory isn't winning wars. It's choosing peace before destruction arrives. Meanwhile, stories grew. Exaggerated, stretched, dramatized. Some said invincible. Others said lucky. Frank let them talk. Myths protect silence. He never corrected the legend publicly, because truth carries more weight quietly. Late nights came. Memories returned uninvited. Basements, shadows, gunfire. Voices screaming echoes. He remembered faces. Some deserved mercy. Some did not. And the ones spared changed everything forever. Because fear creates enemies instantly, always. But respect creates distance and control. That was the move. The Mafia understood. Not mercy, weakness, but calculated dominance. Years passed slowly. Health declined gently. No prison bars. No gunshots waiting. Just time collecting what it's owed. When death finally came quietly, softly, there was no chaos. No headlong screaming. Just an ending to a long game. Harlem kept moving. Streets never stop. But the rules remained. Written in blood. Control the supply. Control the power. Choose timing wisely. Choose battles carefully. And most